Good evening. And we are in Genesis chapter 11, where we left off, and I'm hoping to get to Abraham and to get into starting with the genealogy of Abraham and starting to follow the storyline. We're going to be on that genealogy and storyline for a long, long time. So hoping to get there tonight. I'm a little under the weather as far as some kind of cold or something, so my voice is a little scratchy, so forgive me. You have to, Jesus said so. So let us open up in prayer. Father, we come before you tonight humbly. And Lord, we set our hearts and our minds, Lord, for wisdom in your word, for revelation, Lord. As Daniel sought for revelation, Lord, that's the heart attitude that we have. And we ask that you would honor it, you would reveal yourself to us, you'd speak to us, Lord, to give us understanding and wisdom, and that you would be praised in everything we do. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. So we left off in Genesis chapter 11. We did get into the Tower of Babel, but we stopped right about, after we started getting into it. So I'm going to I went through some of it. I want to go a little bit back into, I started off with why the Lord did it. And that's pretty much where I left off, explaining. Because a lot of times, I remember when I read this as a kid, I didn't get why what they were doing was so bad. Because you definitely lose some in translation, in English, and you miss some of the point of it, and without some background, you can kind of think, well, why is it so bad that they were all together and building a big city, right? So I started to explain last time at the end about this is what's really going on here is that they're making a name for themselves in the face of God, a name for mankind to stand in defiance, that we're powerful and look what we can do, and that's why the Lord says, if they set their mind to it, right? Look what they're already doing now. If they continue, nothing is going to be too difficult for them. And also, the clear implication is that if they're left to continue, the whole world will be poisoned again like it was before. All right? That's also a clear implication of it, too. And it's been, I've looked into a lot of different things. It's very much believed by most scholars that this was a ziggurat designed for witchcraft. And you wonder, how did they get witchcraft? Well, in Israel sages, always, there's different texts that you can use. There's also oral tradition. There's a lot of it that all have one theme, and that is fallen angels. The Nephilim are the ones that taught and gave witchcraft to mankind. Now, can I confirm that? Because it's not directly here in the text. In this text, it does not specifically say that. But yet, like I said, there's also writings in the apocryphal books that very much say that, and yet there is strong Jewish tradition. And I say Jewish because, remember what I already explained to you. I said when I am quoting Jewish sources, I'm always going back to the Second Temple period and before. I'm not going after, right? Is everybody? So you have to know that from all the next 2 years, when I'm really getting an understanding from Judaism, okay, I'm not going to get it after 70 AD when the temple was destroyed, okay? Because after that time, and because of the rise of Christianity, Judaism was changed. They had to write all new ways to practice it because the temple was destroyed. Okay, and they had to try to combat and twist all these things to combat Christianity because of all the prophetic verses that really were so clear from Daniel and Isaiah and many other places, Jeremiah. Okay, so that's why I don't use any of those sources. At that time, Judaism in many ways became lost. Okay, so anyway. But if you look back through Israel's history, and you look back through many of the old sages and rabbis of Israel, they all confirmed, which is written in some of the apocryphal books and other places, that it was indeed where mankind got witchcraft from, was fallen angels. And we're taught it, and it was passed down. All right? So, I say that, give you the background, because I always told you that I'm going to give you opinions and I'm going to give you facts, right? And the only facts that I completely rely on are the ones that are specifically written here in the text. Okay? Right. So I'm going to give you where I got that information from and why I think it's accurate and I think it's trustworthy, but yet it is opinion to some degree. It's not, I wouldn't write it as exact fact. Okay? But the other thing about it is it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, is where mankind got the knowledge of, bypassing the Holy Spirit and supernatural power. All right? And learning that human beings can access it. Okay?
And it must be happening now.
Yeah, well, all of these, there's nothing new under the sun, as quoting Solomon from, okay? And the point is that witchcraft has always been around since the beginning, and it's still around today. So, anyway, but that is an important piece of this. You have to understand why what they're doing is in the face of God, all right? And there is major witchcraft going on here. And the Lord is again stepping in to deliver us from ourselves. Just like in the flood, he saved us. It was salvation. Love was his motivation. All right? And the same here. Love was his motivation because their intentions were evil and it was just going to grow. But also the other key part of it is the clear line that the Lord says that if whatever they put their mind to will not be impossible for them, right? If you just look at the accumulation of knowledge over thousands of years of accumulation of knowledge, it's not that we are smarter today than Isaac Newton was, okay? It's not that we are more brilliant than many people back 1,000, 2,000 years ago. It is an accumulation of knowledge. Knowledge accumulates. And eventually, there's one discovery can change everything. Well, one discovery of electricity and how to implement it changed the entire world, didn't it? Yeah. All right? You take that one discovery away, where would we be?
Candles.
Okay? So absolutely, it's an accumulation of knowledge, but if you consider just today, what we're using this as. Well, what is mankind using all this power and technology together? What are we using it for? All this unity and world unity. We're doing the same exact thing, standing in the face of God. All right, and making a name for ourselves. Mankind is the beginning and the end, and we are even our own gods now because evolution pretty much makes us the highest beings. Right? So, very much is that same spirit, okay? All right, so the Lord is again intervening in mankind, his history, and to get us and to steer us away from the course we were going. But I want to get a little bit into language, all right? Language is very interesting. I've looked into this actually a decent amount. I find it fascinating because there's a lot of interesting facts and connections if you go back when it comes to language. Because like I said, the whole time is what we're doing is we take the words of the Bible, we believe it because Jesus told us to. That's our, right? Yeah. And because of that, we take the words and then we take them and then we apply them to what we see and to what's around us. So we take this story and we believe it. Now we apply it to history and the history of language. And guess what we find? It makes a lot of sense and it fits in pretty well. That's what we see. All right. First of all, the fact is when you go back in language, there's so many connections. Yes, we have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of languages in the world. But what you have to look right off the bat is that many of them, you can take just 30 languages at this point and then just connect it to one, and that one came from another offshoot. But there was really three main, you can break it all down to three. It could easily be more than three, but if you look at three completely different styles of language, completely different from the ground up, and that is, you could say what is it called? A pictogram. You have, now I learned this fact years ago, and the first time I heard this, I did not think it could possibly be true. And then I researched it, and it's true. I heard this line, and it's check it out. All the languages, okay, from the east or to Israel, okay, in the Middle East, all go right to left, okay? And all the languages on the other side of the hemisphere, pointing towards Israel, go left to right. When I first heard that, I thought, that can't be true. Guess what? It's true. All right? And you have, when you go the other hemisphere, you have thousands of languages, and yet you have that pictogram style, so many languages in the Asian world trace back to Mandarin Chinese. There's hundreds of offshoots. But if you go back far enough, that's what you find. Well, what do we have in Europe? Okay? We got Italian, French, Spanish, English, there's more. Portuguese, come on, help me out, there's more. German, Russian, Czechoslovakian, okay? And you know what? All of them can be traced to one language. Greek. And even many of them in a different way can be traced to a language that was traced to Greek. A language that came after Greek. And that's Latin. Okay? But you can easily go back to original Greek, okay, and see where all those offshoots came from. Now, the Koine Greek, I've always heard different people say it different ways. So, that Alexander the Great actually really put his own stamp on and talked to and became the language of his empire to bring them together. And that was the language that the Holy Spirit used to bring the gospel to the world. We're going to get into that next year. Okay? But if you look at that, there was Greek already. He just made a specific kind of Greek because they were all splintered, because right there in that Macedonian world, if you could say, okay, you had about 100 different versions of their Greek, which all separated them in tribes, and they were all disjointed because of it. He gave them a one language and brought them together, and then they had great unity, and they all became one people. All right? So language truly does bring unity, doesn't it? But most of the time, unity in human nature turns bad because our goals and our hearts have evil intentions, right? But it's interesting when you look at language. You can go all the way back you can go back to ancient Greek, right? And you can see almost all of the European, and now including obviously North and South America, you can throw in there because that's where our languages came from, that all are an offshoot of somehow all shoot back to ancient Greek. Isn't that pretty amazing? You can also look at the Middle Eastern languages. Okay? Obviously, what do I believe was the original first language? I believe it's Hebrew. Now, why do I believe that? Because you see Noah, you already went through it, and then it follows that family line down through Shem, right, to Abram. And then Abram was sent out, and he was called a Hebrew, because you've already read it, right? You know why he was called a Hebrew? the name, the word Hebrew was used because it means that language from that language from the east. Okay? For that language that was over there, I forgot exactly the exact meaning. It's something like that. I'm in the ballpark, but it's more exact than that. Anyway, because he brought a foreign language, to Canaan, Hebrew, and him and his household spoke Hebrew, but it was not a language of the people there. But yet they could communicate. So it's very also likely that there was a common language, right? Or the one thing that also probably happened a lot, which we never think of because it's not written in the text, that many, many, many times they're using translators. We just don't think of that. But many, many times they're using translators. The translator just didn't get his name in the book, but that's happening. That's what right? But that's very interesting because the Hebrew language came, and that goes all the way back, and that's traced to be the oldest that we have, right? Many, many languages, but there also could have been a form, and it could have been splintered off, right? But what languages can splinter off of that? You have multiple languages in that area, okay? Obviously, you have Hebrew. But the other one, well, if you were, since this is a group that I think is more educated than the common ignorant Christian, would think, well, then you got to have Arabic because that's ancient. Arabic is not ancient. Islam is not ancient. Okay? It is not. Where did Arabic come from, and how did it become such a powerful language? It came directly from Islam because of Muhammad's visions of receive Muhammad's visions or die. And because of that, they swallowed up that area. And because of that religion, they all eventually spoke the same language, wiping out all the ancient languages of the people of that area. All right? And what did it do? It brought unity with bad intention. Didn't it? Yeah. Okay? But the ancient language of Aramaic, okay? Now, where did you get the Aramaic language from? There was the common language for a long, 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 long time, hundreds of years, and it goes back to the Persian Empire, okay? I know. First Babylon and then the Persian Empire, okay? Babylonian, they had their own language, which got wiped off the map, okay? But the language of Aramaic was the Persian language, the Medo-Persian language, the Medes and the Persians, could say. And that language, because of their first major empire, after taking over the Babylonian Empire, that became the common language in the Middle East, Aramaic. And it lasted a long, long time. And if you take the Arabic language, guess where its roots are? Aramaic. It absolutely is. You can definitely follow that trace like you can do with English to Latin. All right? Why? Because they write the same way. There's a lot of the same sounds and a lot of the same characters. Okay? And so it's an offshoot of it. You know that in ancient Aramaic and Hebrew, there's many words that are the same. Many. There's many words that are exactly the same word. Now, you look at Spanish.
No.
Okay? Yeah. You hear that a lot, huh? So you look at Spanish, what do we have? America here, and we have Mexico at the bottom, right? Well, us in Canada, you could say. But truly, if you're growing up in New York like I do, yes, you speak one language because we're Americans, but yet we all have a pretty decent knowledge of Spanish. And we use Spanish words on a regular basis that we all know, don't we? Mm-hmm. Actually, to some degree, there's already been a morphing of the two languages together. Taco, my favorite. Okay? You know what I mean? Okay? So all of us, even with, we don't speak Spanish, you could say, but we have a pretty good knowledge of the language already. It's enough to get around for a lot of us, enough to be able to somewhat communicate, right? And already you're seeing the languages start to mix, aren't you? And what do you get? You get a crossbreed version of and I guarantee you, 20 years from now, it's going to be a lot more. Okay? And then what happens eventually? Over time. They morph into a new language. That's what happens. We speak the language of English, but try to read something from 1500 AD in England. It's barely decipherable. It's the same language. We're an offshoot. What we speak now is an offshoot of that, but it's not the same language.
Even King James.
All right. Well, to some degree, King James is in the middle.
Yeah.
Right? But if you even go back before that,
Forget about
okay, it's a different language. The language is it's really a different language now. There's some similarities, and we have a base that we can base sounds and base letters, but yet it's become a different language. So I'm just trying to get you to see the picture, and my only reason for you to see all of this and for you to know this, again, why do you need to know all of this? Well, what I'm simply trying to do is, we take this, what we see, right? Because we believe it, because Jesus told us to believe it. And because we believe it, then we take it, and then what do? We apply it around us in the world, and does it hold up? And what do we find every time? It does. And even in this situation, it holds up. It makes a lot of sense, and it fits perfectly in to the scenario. Right? And of course, now, there's a lot of other cool things with language. I'm no, novice. I just did some reading and some articles because I like doing that, and that's it. So very basic. But even in that basic understanding, you see a lot of cool things, and it really, again, shines light on the story. You look at now because you kind of think if you haven't had that background or have been taught that, you kind of think that at Babel the Lord made 100,000 languages. No. He very well could have made 4, 3, 4, 5 and pushed the people out. I have heard it suggested that there was probably 3 main language, was 3 main groups that were pushed out this way in 3 directions. Okay? And then eventually, over time, they get isolated, and like I just said, things mix together. Now, if you were in Second Temple, if you were in Palestine, the name given by the Romans to insult the Jews, okay, in the time of Jesus, you would very likely, you were definitely bilingual, but there's many who would also be trilingual, and common practice. Everyone would speak, who was a Jew, would speak Hebrew and would speak Aramaic. A lot of times you speak Aramaic on the street, but in the synagogue, there's only allowed one language. You speak Hebrew. All right? So those 2 languages were very mixed. But also because of the influence of Greek and being under the Roman rule, okay, and then the Romans were trying to also bring Latin. Even though Greek was already established by Alexander and became the common language, and many of the Roman soldiers spoke Greek, mostly all Roman soldiers spoke Latin and Greek. They were bilingual in those 2 languages. Okay? So what is important? Well, just look at all those languages right there. What happens over time? They mix and change and morph, and you get a bunch more. You get triple the amount of languages.
More confusion.
Yep. More confusion. Yes. But Alexander, and I love this story because it comes out here. I don't know if you know who that is. You're going to learn it in eschatology class. You're going to learn all about Alexander the Great. Okay? His main accomplishment that brought them together was creating a Greek language that they all would have as one language. And he used that, okay, and built an empire off of it. All right? So it's a powerful thing, isn't it? And if you've been around different languages, you realize that, wow, my goodness, we're both humans, but it doesn't feel like it. I can talk to my dog better than I can talk to this person, right? So, anyway, okay. Now if you take a person who speaks 3 or 4 languages, they mix them all together. And their common speech has all words from all different languages all the time. And you get that, what happens? You get a new language out of it. Yiddish is Hebrew mixed with Russian. Oh, a lot has Polish and Russian. And there's a mixture of Polish and Russian in Hebrew all mixed together, and that's where you get Yiddish. And then it came to New York City, and then threw a lot of English in there, and that's modern Yiddish. All right? So so we see this story. No, just like the Bible story. Oh, no, Noah's Ark. It's so ridiculous. Oh, God came down and confused your language. It's so ridiculous. Actually, it makes perfect sense in the world that we live in. And like I said before, why would there have been? Okay, you could solve it with time. That's everybody's answer all the time. So, well, just time. Over 100,000 years, a million years, or 2 million years. Anytime there's a problem, add more time, you fix it, right? But why would you, if everyone that was born already had one language, why would you come up with the reason to always come up with a separate one and at least lose that common one that keeps you together? Right? Oh, we'll say, a million years to do that. Well, the Neanderthal man, we got into that last time, that wasn't that long ago. Oh, goodness, don't let me go down there. You'll see my hair stand up. But it's short enough that it always stands up, but you know what I mean. Okay. So we're moving on from that. Let's go on now to spreading out of people. And that's another cool thing. People were pushed in multiple directions because of this. All right? And separated. And within probably a very short time, there was war between those groups because because of it. All right? And so how did people get all around? Okay? And that's really the question. Do you know when we finally were able to get out there and get a nice big boat out there to Hawaii and we found the island? Guess what was already there? People. They were already there. Okay, for a long, long time. And the Fijian Islands as well, right? And there was whole cultures that had been there for thousands of years. Okay? Or at least 1,000 years. And but if you look at, just simply look at the Mayan culture, how their incredible understanding of mathematics and things, and of course they were totally witchcraft. Their whole culture was built on keeping up their human sacrifice to a certain level each day to appease the gods. Okay? But yet, they sent out ships and went out places and discovered and found islands and things. And what do you find? A lot of the people that from the islands and a lot of the ancient Mayan-looking people. Guess what? Do they have any similarities? The answer is yes. Okay? Look at American Indians. All right? And look at Eskimos. Is there any similarities? Yes. Now, they're not exactly the same. The Eskimo, there's definitely over time, there's some changes in skin color. Right? But hair and facial features are very close. But then, because then you throw Europeans in, and we look in every single way completely and totally different, don't we? But if you follow, now why does all that matter? Because you've got to follow the spreading out, right? How did they all get here? Well, okay, when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, did he find human beings? Yes, he thought he was in India. We already went over that, how he actually got his information from the Bible. Okay? But that's what you all hopefully learned in school. That's why American Indians were called Indians, because they thought he was in India. Simple as that. Okay? So you can say Native Americans. All right? But the point is that he found them, and because they kind of looked also like what he expected them to look like, except for their skin color was lighter. All right? But they definitely were not looking European. But let's follow this track now. You have, if you just take this base scenario, Just give me 3 languages, 3 base languages, right? You have the Asian language going out towards the east, right? You have the, you could say the European or ancient Greek style of languages that all have that similarity, all read left to right and have similar sounds and characters, right? Going to the left. All right, well, from where I'm standing, so you could say going to the west. Okay, so then who went south? Right? Well, a lot of those Middle Eastern languages that would have gone down 3 ways. But what do you have really as far as skin color and main features? I remember being as a kid in Sunday school, and well, even I was in Christian school, and I remember always the answer. And a lot of teachers never had good answers, ever, in Christian school. So they always have a kid who thinks he's smart, and he'd ask this question. So how did we get white people, black people, and Asian people if we all came from Adam and Eve? Is this a difficult question? No. This is not a difficult question at all, but it's interesting. Okay? How did we get different eye sizes? All it is an extra little fat layer up here. That's all it is. And you take a person who has a really strong one, because the thicker the fat layer, the smaller your eyes are. Okay? Take that away and go with a big, humongously wide-eyed European. And what do you get? Somebody in the middle. Simple as that. So what was it originally? It was the genetic mutation. Now, do we know if we lost it or if they did? We assume they did. Anyway, that's for people smarter than me. But these are questions you have to raise. That's the only difference. Okay? Now, how did you get super light and super dark? So what would have Adam and Eve really have looked like?
Too dark.
They would not have had this deficient skin. My skin is deficient. Okay? I need help. Okay? Because truthfully, I have lost information in my skin. All right? And I have to get it back through vitamins, or I have a problem. And I have to get and I have to protect myself from the sun. And if you know me well, you know that it only takes me 3 minutes for my face to turn bright red and burn. That quickly. I mean, you know, my skin isn't healthy. Okay? I lost information. I didn't gain it, I lost it. Really white skin has lost pigmentation, has lost melanin. Okay? Now, then we go on the other spectrum. How do you have people with so much melanin? Well, if you take 2 people in the middle, right, you get all of those combinations. That's it. You can go, all right, so you have, so Adam and Eve would have very much been, actually, what is there really in the middle? Skin color and hair and all of that. Think about it. Middle Eastern. Right? Darker complexion, still curly hair, but in the middle. Right? Now, how would we come out of that? Well, after, of course, it's all in the genetics. You have right in a person's DNA, there already is 1,000 differences. We know that Jacob and Esau, we're going to get to them soon, were brothers. They were twins, except for they were completely different. And Esau had a real reddish tone to his skin, kind of like me, because I'm red. People say I'm white. I'm not white. That's pink. Okay, and this is winter pink. In the summer, I'm really pink. All I get is redder. I never get tan. It just gets burn on top of burn on top of burn, and it just keeps getting more red. That's what happens to me. Okay? So, all it takes, right, in that genetic information is, well, I'll just explain. Then Esau had a more reddish tone to his skin, and he was much hairier. They're twin brothers. Okay? So right there you see a variation. David, King David, it seems to suggest, could have had red hair. All right? But it was stood out because he was in a place where it separated him because no one had it. And that's why it was something that was written, because if everybody had it, it wouldn't have been anything you would write. Okay? So he stood out because of that. So anyway, all it takes is you have that genetic information. You take a person, eventually your kids have different shades. I look at my two kids. My daughter has my white, pale Irish skin, and my son has my wife's more Spanish. She tans. She'll turn 3 shades in the summer, and she doesn't burn. My son has much more, barely burns. I don't even have to put lotion on. My daughter, 2 minutes. She'll in pain. Okay? So, right there you have all that genetic information. So all it takes for people to get lighter is for 2 people that are already on the lighter side. And guess what happens? They get lighter. And when they get isolated into a gene pool, those traits grow. And remember, for the first, until Sinai, is when the Lord started to rule out marrying your sister. And in many cultures, they still did that for a long time, and in many cultures today, they still do it. So, that also makes the gene pool extremely isolated, and these features, one mutation then can get totally isolated, and within time you have 2,000 or 3,000 that all have that strong mutation or strong genetic information. I'm just simply saying that, remember, we take the science, and we take the Bible, and why do we believe it? Because Jesus said so. Then we take it, and then we apply it to these natural things that we see and experience. And when it comes to how we got different people groups, different ethnicities, and why we have such differences on the outside, is very easily explained. But then you go on the inside. Do you know, when you go back far enough, they always expected that there would be a difference. There's absolutely no difference. Okay? People are people. Okay? And I remember, this is kind of a funny story. I remember in Good Shepherd School, I think it was 9th grade. We had a teacher. He was a great teacher. I loved him, and he was black. In a school of a bunch of white kids. Okay, but he was a great teacher, and we would play basketball. We loved to play basketball. Well, he came and played with us and destroyed us by himself. Okay, but he was a really nice guy. And then he could out-jump. He's like a 45-year-old man, and we're all, he's jumping like 3 feet higher than all of us. We can't keep up with him. And then somebody in the class, very ignorantly, said to him, yeah, that's because black guys have an extra muscle in their legs. That's why they can jump so much higher than us. But he was not kidding. Well, the teacher was not I forget his name. What was it? I should know his name. That was so long ago, though. It was like, I forget his name exactly. But he said, men are not all created equal. Did we all come from 2 people? So how we have an extra muscle in our leg now? But I remember he absolutely made that point. If you take the biblical model, right? Now, you can have genetic markers that in a gene pool get isolated and become stronger, right? But all it takes for that is to take 2 from 2 opposite sides of the spectrum to go right back to the middle again. That's all it takes, okay? The darkest person with the lightest person will produce a medium skin-colored person. And in that, they have the genetic material to go to every other side and every other shade. Okay? Depending on just how much melanin they get in their skin. And that also is what affects their hair as well. Okay? So very simple. Anyway, all of those things, we take it, we apply it, it all holds up. Now, all right? Now, all men are created equal. A lot of people think that is from the Bible. It is not. All men, it does not say in the Bible, all men are created equal in the sight of God. Although if you ask a lot of Christians, they would say, that's from the Bible. No, it isn't. That's from Thomas Jefferson. Okay? But yet, the concept is from the Bible. How is the concept from the Bible? Very simple. Because we all came from two people. In that, you take away all, quote unquote, because I don't like the word, racial tension. You take it all away. It's all gone. Because we came from two people. How could we possibly have things based on our outward appearance? Okay? And that is, right there into that, you totally destroy that. In the Bible, it's mentioned. Isaiah mentions, can the Ethiopian change his skin? Obviously, the Ethiopians were known, because you remember, Ethiopia is, they were actually very much involved in the Middle East. And they would have been all around. You see, even in the book of Acts, you have Ethiopians coming up to the temple. Okay? But guess what? They were black. But it's never mentioned in the Bible about any tension between skin colors. You know why? Because we came from two people. When you start at that premise, you can't have that. Where did that premise come from? Where did that understanding come from? It came from Charles Darwin. Okay, that's where it came from. And that's who really should be the one that we should blame for racial tension. Okay, because the truth is, in evolution, we had us being evolved in different stages of evolution. You know that? And anyway, which is totally sick, contrary to Scripture. So Thomas Jefferson's estimation of the biblical concept and the right to people and mankind was absolutely accurate. All men are created equal in the sight of God. Okay? So, how did we get the mixed, you could say, ethnicities with very, very different physical features? Well, it's actually easily explained through science and through DNA. Very easily, DNA and mutation. Okay? And so it really, and I remember when I was young and I heard that question, I thought that's a big question. And truthfully, it's not at all. It's extremely easy. And it's a question that only comes from us being misinformed because of evolution is the only way we would even think of that. All right? So, now, why is that important? Well, look at the spreading out of people. Now, we're at a time, because of modern technology, where we are starting to break down the language barrier. And as we're breaking it down, there is more unity, and what's happening? The evil intentions of man. Isn't that true? Yep. Absolutely. And now you have an incredible mixing pot. Or melting pot, you could say. It's not just New York anymore, it's all over the world. Okay? And because of that, more and more you see skin colors coming in the middle. More and more you're going to see those features start to blend in. Okay? That's what happens. It only takes a couple generations. Okay? And those things change. And because many times you had people who marry within their ethnicity or their culture, right? And those things stay. But just a couple of them, in America here, what happened to Americans is that there was a great mixture, and, most, even you could take a regular Caucasian American, and they have a little bit of Italian, a little bit of Irish, a little bit of Polish, a little bit of Lord knows what, and one of them had a great uncle who was American Indian. Okay? So, it's like all over the place. All right? And now, so what do we have? We have a mixing of those features. Okay? Anyway, I could keep going with a lot of this stuff. I love this kind of stuff. If you also look at the Irish, I'll say this last thing. This is interesting. Okay? How did the Irish get such... Most people think the Irish have red hair. Okay? Now, do some people in Ireland have red hair? Yes. Actually, red hair is a mutation. Okay? And all of us have the DNA variation to let it can happen randomly. All right? Now, as it gets isolated, it gets stronger and stronger. But any one of us, European folk could at any moment have a child with a little red hair. Okay? But how did you get these people with such light skin and then all get such dark hair? Most Irish people have my hair color. Dark. And it's kind of interesting because they have very dark hair, but yet they have very, very light skin. Well, usually that doesn't go together, right? Usually you lighter skin, you have lighter hair. So that's interesting. Well, if you look back in history, you'll see that there was many Spanish who conquered in parts of Ireland, and many who mixed in hundreds of years ago. And you brought a strong Spanish, more than hundreds, like almost 1,000, okay? And who brought that whole separate added in to the DNA, which then over a couple generations spreads through the whole country, and you get your features change. So maybe the Celts originally actually did have more of the red hair and freckles with a much higher degree, which is what you also see in Scotland and you see in many parts of England, right? So anyway, it's just interesting. I've read stuff on this. There's no exact answers. You don't this is just, looking at the different historical markers and trying to follow what you see and the features and things. But it's very interesting. Of course, how would we have American Indian and Eskimo people, and going all the way down to South America, that did not have any of our European features, were completely and totally different. Well, if you follow through Asia, right, and add in, like I talked, some ice there, down even 100 miles, you'd have a land bridge going right across, okay, from Siberia right across to Alaska. And very easily to be explained how the migration of ethnicities and why people were already there, okay, for a long time, and they continue to spread out. And of course, as population grows, there's more spreading, and wars, more spreading, more people running away as there's more and more of that happens. So anyway, all of it lines up and makes perfect sense. Okay, we are done with this. We're now moving on to verse 10. These are the records of the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and became the father of Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived 500 years after he became the father of Arphaxad, and he had other sons and daughters. And Arphaxad lived 35 years and became the father of Shelah. And Arphaxad lived 403 years after he became the father of Shelah, and he had other sons and daughters. Now this is giving us the genealogy, which is incredibly important. If you look at the beginning of Matthew, what does it start with? A genealogy. If you look at the beginning of Luke, you know what it starts with? A genealogy. So to us, they're not that important, but to God, they're very important. Okay? So, because of those genealogies is how they can track all the way back. Okay? And to the line of Abraham. Now, through Shem is the line of Abraham. Okay? So, I'm not going to go through all of those names. You read through it. But this is the record really giving you the bloodline from Shem to Abraham. That's the main point for you to get. Okay? And if you look at it, most of them, it's 25 to 30 years before they had the next one. But then they lived together for hundreds of years. But one thing you see is that if you just go down each one, they live a little less. Yeah. A little less each time. Each one lives a little less. Even when you get to Abraham, when you get down to Jacob. And Jacob lives 170 years at the end, and he's talking to Pharaoh, and he's about to die. But he says, "My years have been few." And we're thinking, he's 170 years old, and he's saying, "My years have been few in comparison to my father's." So the generations are going down and down and down and down, and less and less and less, continually. All right? So, but Noah and Shem still outlived many of these other people for multiple generations. Okay? So, let's move on. Let's go to chapter 12. Well, actually, go to 31 so we can, no, back up, sorry. Let's go to verse 27, 11:27. Now these are the records of the generations of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran became the father of Lot. And Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his birth in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. And the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. And the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, is Iscah. And Sarai was barren, she had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son, Abram's wife, and they went out together from Ur of the Chaldeans in order to enter the land of Canaan, and they went as far as Haran and settled there. And, and the days of Terah were 205 years. Terah died in Haran. Okay? And now, from here on out, we will now on, for the entire rest of the Bible, be dealing and talking about this man, Abraham. Okay? All the way down in the New Testament as well. Okay? So, now, if you've heard before, if you've never really gone through this before, you're wondering Abram and Abraham, don't worry, you'll get to see how that works out. Okay? But his name is Abram, which means father. Okay? But yet, his wife is barren. Now, what's interesting, too, is that, remember, Jesus said it was not that way in the beginning. He brought us back to creation. All right? I already explained the polygamy thing, so I'm not doing it again. But in this culture, it's already very, very rampant for rich and powerful men. Right? But yet, Abram becomes a rich and powerful man, but yet doesn't have that. It takes his wife to convince him to sleep with another woman, right? So that they could have children as a surrogate, since they couldn't do surgery. It was surrogacy, really, okay, in the original form. And I'm sure she really had to twist his arm. I'm sure, I mean, he fought all the way. But anyway, it was her idea. Yeah. We'll give Abraham the nod that he fought, and he put up a big argument about it. Okay.
Are you for or against?
So we don't know. He might have fought her. He might have agreed with her, but the text just says, and Abraham agreed. So that's all we know. Okay.
What does it get you?
But Abraham, because of the way, well, I'm jumping ahead, so I'll wait. I'll wait. There's another very important thing that comes out there when we get to that part. So, but now, this is chapter 12. This is really the establishment, the first establishment of the Abrahamic covenant. Now, it gets reiterated with more detail as it moves on, but this is the first establishing of it. Now, if you look over to the notes, I want you to look at them. Okay, you see, on the page before, God established his covenant with Noah, and that was the Noahic covenant for all mankind. Now, okay, and that one is still in force. But now the Lord chooses this man and establishes a covenant with him, but not for mankind, for his specific bloodline. And not all of his descendants, one. Okay? And we're going to get to that. But this notice, though, okay, that this is not conditional. A lot of times, there's conditional covenants, conditional blessings. One thing about this one is that it doesn't have a condition in it. Okay? Well, I guess it does. You could say that he has to go. He has to go first. Right? So you could say, fine. All right? It has one condition. He goes and the Lord will do the rest. Okay? So let's read it. Now the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great. And so you shall be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you, underline, circle, highlight if you're one who does that. Extremely important verse. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. From his body, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Okay? That's a pretty good promise. I'd say that's a pretty good deal. But he's got to leave his whole family, everything he knows, go to a strange land where they speak strange language with strange customs. Okay, very much opposite of the ones he's been trained in. Okay? Because his family has, through the line of Shem, has had an understanding to some degree of the God of Noah. Okay? And what pleases him. And that's where Abraham got it from. It's not that he... And you can wonder, well, you could say, well, that doesn't completely make sense because, But yeah, why did Abraham make sure that they stayed within that family for their spouses? Because of the way that their customs, and he wanted to keep that isolated. Okay, so now Laban, we're going to see later on, is a conniver, all right, and twists things, but yet the moral understanding is still there, is still present in the family. Okay? He's going to a land where they do not have that. So, now this blessing is interesting because this covenant is reestablished now multiple times, but it is the covenant of Abraham, but it's passed down. And it's reiterated to his son and then his son's son. Okay? So, this is the establishment of the Abrahamic covenant. Abraham goes and the Lord does the rest. I will bless you and make your name great, and so you shall be blessed, and I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And that comes up multiple times as we move on. Verse 4, so Abram went forth as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Lot was his nephew. Okay? Now Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Okay? He's already 75. Verse 5, and Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his nephew, and all their possessions which they had accumulated, and the persons which they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. Thus they came to the land of Canaan. And Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. Now, the Canaanite was then in the land. Now, the Canaanite specifically is not one ethnicity, but they're offshoots of Canaan, who established that land, who was the son of Ham, and the land and the people there were cursed by God. Right? Remember that? Yes, they were. Let's move on. Okay, verse 7, and the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Then he proceeded from there to the mountain on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent. Now, it was not called Bethel at that time. It's called Bethel later by Jacob. But remember, this is written with hindsight. Moses is recapping and telling you in the story. Already, the people that know this or listening or written to already know where Bethel is. Okay? They're giving you a land marker so you know the area. All right? On the west of Ai, on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. So where did he get this from? Did he come up with that? Build an altar and come to the Lord with sacrifice, and the Lord will respond, and that's how you approach him? Did he come up with that himself? He's been taught that. That's been passed down from Noah and his sons through Shem, right? And that's what did Noah, what was the first thing Noah did when he got on solid ground, right? And that goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. Okay? So, they approached the Lord through the blood. Okay? And that is a very important key. Of course, it's all establishing. Just that very, like I told you, when the first two animals were killed and Adam and Eve were covered, that was already prophesying of the cross. It was already building the storyline. It's already there. And now it's just going to grow and grow and grow through. But it already had the picture at that point. Okay? So, so the Lord appeared to Abram, to your descendants I'll give this land. So he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. Then he proceeded from there to the mountain on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent. All right, I read this part. Duh. Okay, verse 9. And Abram journeyed on, continuing toward the Negev. Now the Negev is the southern part of Israel. Okay? Is more of the desert area. The southern part of Israel is all desert. Okay? Verse 10, now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. Okay, now the Lord sent him there, and yet now there's this horrible famine in the place the Lord sends him to, and he has to flee and go down to Egypt. Okay? Verse 11, and it came about when he came near to Egypt that he said to Sarai his wife, see now, I know that you are a beautiful woman. Now, this, you've already read through it. This story takes some explaining because I'm just going to tell you now, I'm going to give you some future, and you have to tie it in. Because later on, this happens again. And you wonder why. Okay, now I want to, the big thing that you have to get here, there's two major things. First of all, she is his sister. It's not a lie. Okay? She's his half-sister. But she is his sister. Okay? Now, all of you can go, ew, if you want. But, remember, the Lord gave us the ew at Sinai. And gave it to us that it was disgusting. And that is not to be done anymore because the population had come up and now they were supposed to intermarry. Okay? And it was a way to rid that so that we would, people, that would mix. And because there obviously also seems to be an unhealthy thing genetically in isolated bloodlines, which is something that we've seen when you look at it that way. Okay? Because one mutation can grow and grow and grow, and it, right? I already explained that to you. So, of course, the Lord knows all of that, doesn't he? All right? Yeah. So,
maybe that's why the lifespan started coming down.
Yeah. I never heard that one, but who knows? I won't rule anything out. The Lord is a lot smarter than we are. But yet, that was not ruled out until Sinai. Okay? And when I say Sinai, I mean when Moses takes people out of Egypt and the Lord gives the Ten Commandments and the covenant to Israel. Okay? It was ruled out then. All right. So, Sarah is his half-sister. So it's not a lie. And why are they doing this? Because Abram has already seen that these people live in a way that the rich and powerful men see a beautiful woman, they will kill their husband and take her. Obviously, if he sees that, and then again, when he's in the area of Shechem, they do the same thing. Okay? So the point is that this is a common thing that, and you'd think, well, wow, that was really horrible. If you look back through history, okay, for the human history, that's a common practice of man. It's been going on for thousands of years.
King David.
Yes, King David did not intentionally do it, but then he did, and we'll get to that. But jumping ahead, but the point is, there's nothing new under the sun. Okay, and Abram is in a different place because he does not have his own area. He does not have a fortified city. All cities this time are fortified. You have walls, you have gates, you have soldiers at the front, right? Abraham does not have that. He's very They're very isolated or not isolated, the opposite. They're very vulnerable, that's the right word, to attack. And he has to be wary of that. He can't go to this area as a sojourner without any of that. And what are they going to do? And they'll just kill him and take her, right? So he already said this to her, and they already had this plan if this happens. Now, the miracle thing is the fact that he was dead on right.
Yeah.
And they did exactly what he thought they were going to do. Meaning, if he was her husband in their minds, they probably would have killed him and taken her, right? So Abraham, I'm calling him Abraham, I'm not going to say Abram. I've done that before. It gets too confusing. He's Abraham. I know the Lord changes his name later, but I can't always jump back and forth between Abram and Abraham. He's Abraham. So we all accept that?
Yeah.
And Sarai will become Sarah. We know her as Sarah. So right now she's Sarai, but to me, I'm going to say Sarah. Okay? Okay. So, obviously, the text doesn't lie. Sarah was obviously extremely beautiful in a standout kind of way. And he was dead on, okay, of what would happen. And of course it did happen, but because he was her brother, right, it kept him alive, but not just kept him alive. Now he's not a threat. Now we can bless him. Now we can be nice to him, right? He's the brother of this woman. We'll take her, and now he's good, There's a big difference between a brother and a husband, right? So the point is, though, he gets blessed, and he gets taken in and blessed because of her. All right? Now, you may think that this was horrible of Abraham to do and Sarah to do, right? Especially of Abraham to do. But Abraham is trying to keep his people alive. Okay? Now, you think it's just kind of Abraham and a couple of, his servants, but then all of a sudden you see him mass an army of 330 men in his house.
Yeah.
There's a lot more. He's a traveling city, is what he is. And after Egypt, it grows a lot bigger. Okay? And you wonder how that is, because to us, we're thinking, they're all slaves. See, we have such the industrial age so changed things that we don't get that. So I'm going to lay that foundation right now as we go. All right? Do you have a job?
Yes.
All right? If you have a job, unless you own your own company, you work for some rich guy.
Right.
Don't you? Do you work for some rich guy? Yes, you do. You are a servant in his company, and you get paid for it. All right? That's it. It's exactly the same. They work for a rich guy. It's a good job. You look at it as them being, you'd wonder why they would want to do that. Probably working for Abraham is probably the best thing that ever happened to these people. All right? Is it better to be on, trying to make your own way and you have nothing, or is it better to work for the rich guy? Yeah, you get benefits. You get a 401k. No one got that reference?
Yeah.
Somebody got it? Oh, there you go. Good. My wife would have. Okay. So, anyway, the point is that most of the time, and sometimes the word servant and slave get interchanged.
Right.
Okay? So we don't completely, because of what we've seen, what our understanding of slavery, which of course was evil, right? We kind of look back at this and think that Abraham is evil with all these people. No, these all people are working for Abraham, and they have a great job. All right? They're on the board of a powerful company. Okay? That's how, before the industrial age, that's how it is. But it's the same. You work for a company. You work for some rich guy, and he pays you for the service you do. Right? It's exactly the same thing. So Abram has a lot of people working for him. Anyway, and he's also thinking about their lives here too. Okay? There's more to it. There's more to it going on. Now, I'm sure once he takes her, he doesn't know what to do. Because you're wondering, because the Bible reads like I told you this the first week. The Bible reads, and many times it reads like a newspaper. Here's the facts. Doesn't necessarily tell you whether this was good or this was bad. A lot of times you get the writer then will give you an opinion sometimes, but not always. Right? This is what happened. And then you use the morality of the Word of God to judge that situation like the people did. Right? We don't get the information on how Abram reacted once they took her. We do get the fact that him and his people are still alive. Right? But I'm sure if you kind of have the idea now that he's like, oh, well, she took her, whatever. I do not believe that to be the case. I'm sure now they're thinking, what do we do? You don't even know. They could even be planning an escape. It's very possible. The Lord intervenes. But the Lord doesn't just intervene. The Lord uses this. He uses this whole situation. Who brings plenty and who brings famine? So, is Abraham down in Egypt by just randomly? No. The Lord put him there. And the Lord uses this to bring fear of him. And he gets blessed because the king gives him all this stuff.
Right.
And he gets totally, all of his stuff pretty much doubled that he had before. He comes out of it way richer than he was before this. Okay? So, so what happens? The Lord stops the Pharaoh before he sleeps with her. Same thing happens again later if you're wondering. Now if you're wondering, well, what's the delay? Well, rich, powerful kings have this whole process you go through, and you think, you got to go through all this. If you think of the book of Esther, it was a 6 months of preparation and physical treatment and etiquette just to look at the king. Okay? And he's got multiple wives getting ready all at once. Okay? That's how it works. So, she is now in that process. All right? But the Lord obviously punishes the people. Okay? Let's move down. Now, you see what happened in verse 15. And Pharaoh's officials saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Because obviously, his guys were trained. If there's some, very beautiful woman, capable woman, the king wants her. And they make him happy, and they probably get blessed if they do it. Right? So, okay, yeah, exactly. So, therefore he treated Abram well for her sake, and gave him sheep and oxen and donkeys and male and female servants and female donkeys and camels. But the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. The Lord wouldn't do that. The Lord, all right, this is sarcasm. You don't know me well enough in this class to know when I say things like this that it's complete sarcasm, but I'm going to say this many, many times. This is one of about 500 different times I'm going to say, well, the Lord would never bring sickness or anything on anyone.
Oh my God.
And the truth is, that is bogus, and that is against Scripture. And there's people teaching that and healing, and the whole healing teaching based on that, which is completely a slander towards the Bible, because there is hundreds of times where the Lord brings famine and sickness and plague and disease. And what's the worst disease you can get? Death on people, right? So you ever hear that, that's a red flag that the teaching is off. Okay? So the Lord struck this house of Pharaoh with the plagues. All right. Then Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife?" Now he knows the Lord has done this, that this has come over their house, and we don't exactly know how. Now, if we go, when we get to Moses, we're going to see that they had sorcerers who figured a bunch of things out. Okay, even that it was the hand of the Creator. Okay, but you're going to see in the time it happens again with Abimelech. Okay, in Canaan, but this kind of scenario happens again. The Lord visits them in a dream. Okay? So that could have happened here too. All right? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife, take her and go. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they escorted him away with his wife and all that belonged to him. So, through all of this, the Lord has majorly increased his wealth and blessing, and protected Sarah. See, I want to say Sarah, but then I'm trying to be technical and say Sarai, so it comes out kind of like Sarah, because I'm confused. All right? Lord protected her before she was touched, but also used it to bring fear. Now, he doesn't have a standing city. He does not have fortified walls. What does he have?
God.
The fear of God is what protects Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And when Jacob is wronged later on, you're going to see, I love this line, so I'm using it now. He says, blessing of Abraham and the fear of Isaac, he says. At one point, when and the point is that there certainly is. Okay? And the Lord used it to give it to them, so the surrounding people will not touch them. All right? So, you could say, well, this was, see, a lot of people say, well, Abraham, does God bless lying? I've heard that. I've gotten that question on this story. Well, he didn't actually lie, first of all. Okay? But he omitted, which, you know. So it's, you know, it's a gray area, because you're going to see this also happens with Isaac and Rebekah. And they were not brother and sister. They were first cousins. Okay? But, and if you're wondering, I'll say it again then, because by the time we get there, you'll forget. So I'll say it again then. That's how we learn things. Repetitive action. Okay? Is that, why did they do that? Because they learned as kids it happened twice and it worked both times. So why would you not do what your father did? And if the Lord both times used it for good, right? So, point is, God uses this for their protection. Now, here's the other thing. Abram was in a terrible situation here. He's trying to keep these people alive. He's running from famine. Okay? And he knows that the beauty of his wife is that some rich, powerful guy, the king or somebody else, will try to take her. And usually when they take her, the husband's got to go. And who knows, when he's gone, they plunder all that he has and all of them, right? So he's in a very difficult situation. God uses it to bring fear of Abram, okay, of the people around. So now he goes back to Canaan doubly blessed, okay? Let's go to chapter 13, okay? So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev, and he and his wife and all that belonged to him, and Lot with him. Now Abram was very rich in livestock and silver and in gold, and he went on his journeys from the Negev as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there formerly. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. And the land could not sustain them while dwelling together, for their possessions were so great they were not able to remain together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. Now the Canaanite and the Perizzite were dwelling then in the land. Now these are the future generations. Now remember, this is written with hindsight. Moses is speaking to people that are now about to go and fight these people. So these are the ones that were there then. Okay? And the Lord has already told Abram that he's going to give him and his descendants, this land. Right? Okay. Verse 8. Then Abram said to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me, nor between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If to the left, then I will go to the right, and if to the right, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the valley of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt as you go to Zoar. So now those were things that Moses put in the text so that the people that are reading it would understand what the place is like. Was like. All right? Now they have a reference. Okay? Abram settled in the land of Canaan, where Lot settled in the cities of the valley and moved his tents as far as Sodom. And he eventually is very sorry that he did that. Right? And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. Now, it does seem that it was an important step for him to separate from Lot. Because the blessing was not on Lot, even though at this point they're very mixed together. But when Lot first was with Abram pretty much raised Lot, taught him everything, helped him, and got him going. So, they're very close. But now he's a grown man with his own stuff, and now he needs to go his own way. Right?
Got pretty blessed being under Abraham.
He surely did. And I'm sure he had exceeding respect for him. Right? So, but they had to separate for the next step for Abram. Okay? And the Lord said to Abram after Lot had separated from him, now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which you see, I will give it to you and to your descendants forever. Highlight, circle, mark, underline. Because this is another incredibly important verse. Okay? I'm going to read it again. And the Lord said to Abram after Lot had separated from him, now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which you see, I will give it to you and to your descendants forever. Now here's another annoying question that I'm going to ask 1,000 times. How long, Joe's been in the class before. How long is forever?
Forever.
Okay. Casey, how long is forever?
Forever.
Okay. Brandon, how long is forever?
Forever.
Okay. And why is that so important? Does it say, I will give it to your descendants forever if you're obedient to me?
No.
No. Now there's plenty of other times where the Lord makes covenants that did have conditional things in it. This one does not. Okay? And how long is forever? Okay, so does that mean now? Then?
Yeah.
Does that mean 10 years from now? Okay, well that you can see how that's a very important point, isn't it? Okay. Verse 16. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can number the dust of the earth, then your descendants can also be numbered. Arise and walk about the land through its length and breadth, for I will give it to you. Then Abram moved his tent and came and dwelt by the oaks of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Now, there's one major problem. The Lord has called him. He's going to have his incredible multitude from his seed, where the entire nation, the entire world is going to be blessed through his seed, through the Lord's going to give this entire land to his descendants. But there's one big problem.
Sarah.
He has no descendants, and he's old. So you think there's a problem here? See, Abram, when it says later on that Abram believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness, we think, oh, well, he believed a little bit and obeyed God. Oh, I would have done the same thing. Baloney! He believed for 25 years, okay, an entire life and everything he had based on a promise that in every natural way was ridiculous. In every natural sense of the word, he was a crazy man. All that he did was for a future generation that he doesn't have. You understand? That is faith. It was all based on what he couldn't see, and was very sure of it. Okay? So, he has no descendant. Now, here's the other question. Why does he have no descendant?
Sarah's barren.
Sarah's barren, yes. That is the natural answer. I want you to look a little bigger on this one. Why does he have no descendant? Why would God do this? Why would God choose a man whose name is Father, whose wife is barren, and yet is moral enough and has been trained in a way that he doesn't just go find a wife who is and add her to the list, but he stays with his wife even though she's barren and everybody knows it? Because mostly all other rich and powerful men would have already gotten another one. Much younger, and they're going to be already having kids. Right? But Abram is morally trained enough that he doesn't do that. Right? He's got incredible character. Okay? But the Lord must have made a mistake. Because the Lord chose the wrong guy. Because the Lord surely knew that Abraham wouldn't just go get another woman. And yet the Lord, every time he talks to him, kind of messes with his head about his children that he doesn't have. Why would God do something like that?
It's got a sense of humor.
Definitely a sense of humor, that is right, and that's why Isaac is named Laughter. Absolutely. But the answer is that God likes to do things that are impossible to show his glory. To demonstrate his power. To demonstrate that he can do anything, anytime, whenever he wants, however he wants, and he'll usually do it the most difficult way just because he can. Alright? And of course, this is the most difficult way. But yet Abram has to follow this whole time in believing God, when by all natural accounts, he was the worst guy chosen for this job. Right? And so that is, God's way. You're going to see that happen over and over again. God always likes to take the weak things to shame the strong. Right? And he takes a man who has no children, whose name is Father, okay? And uses him to become a father of multitudes and to bring forth the Messiah, the Savior of the world, that all nations of the earth will be blessed through him. Okay? Because of his faith. Because that truly this is where we get the word faith. It is not, the concept comes from the Bible. All right? Abraham believed God. And he was reckoned as righteous before the Lord because he believed his word and lived by it. Even when he never really saw the fruit.
But he did hear from him.
He did hear. Yes, he did. But, we hear from God last week and we're already saying, God, you haven't talked to us. He goes, 15 years at a time. Right? And keeps going. When was the last time God really spoke to you? When was the last time you had a prophetic word you really knew was from God? Some of us can maybe go, 6 months? About 4 months? Maybe a year? Maybe 2? How about 15? Would you say God hasn't spoken to you in a while? Right? So, the point is that he continues on trusting the Lord. Alright? Now, okay, it is 8 o'clock. We'll stop here. We're at 14, and you can already see that our pace increases every week. It's going to increase a lot more next week, and we're going to get to the point where we're going through 15 to 20 chapters a week. Okay? Because we're going to be flying through stories as we go. Now in Genesis, it's still going to be kind of slow because there's a lot here. But once we get to Exodus, and then our pace is going to increase a lot. All right? So I want you to read to Genesis 20. All right? Read through Genesis 20. And we'll take a 15-minute break and start back at 8:15.